We're now recording. So it's Saturday, the 29th of October. Thank you everyone for returning as we continue our preparing to surrender to prison webinar. And of course, as we discuss preparing to surrender, that of course ties into what it is you're going to do in prison. Quick reminder, as obvious as it may seem, when you go into the prison system, you're going to be frustrated. You maybe deal with setbacks and blows. And we filmed a webinar called Getting Comfortable Being Uncomfortable. You're going to deal with frustrations and staff. Our good friend and former client, Nate Schott, just joined the call talking about trying to get off probation early. DOJ, of course, shuts it down, waiting on the judge. Frustration is always going to be around you. It's really how you respond to it, and which is why it's so vital you are watching all of our webinars. I used this phrase yesterday in the webinar. I just said it. It had come to me. If you haven't done this, you're not prepared for prison. If you haven't done this, you're not prepared for prison. Then I actually received a phone call from someone yesterday who said, I'm not prepared for prison. And I'm attending some of the webinars, but it's clear I need to do more work in between the webinars. So that's the takeaway for all of you. 30 minutes or an hour or 90 minutes together is great, but unless you're actually doing the work in between the webinars and implementing what we teach, I think you're missing opportunities. That is our team's really humble opinion. Yesterday, we talked about preparing to surrender. Today, we're going to cover that as well, but also get into the weeds of life in federal prison a little bit as you create your plan or your adjustment. I do want to make it interactive. I asked if I ask someone to speak, let's try to keep it brief so others can engage. As always, this is recorded. If questions come up, please add them to chat. Our team will respond. With that said, someone on this webinar, Glenn, if you will contribute, or Arthur, or someone, Casey, can someone give me a summary of what they would like one full day to look like in federal prison? Can someone give me in 2 minutes or 90 seconds what they hope to accomplish in prison, a 24-hour window? Can someone jump in and volunteer themselves and tell me what that would look like for them?
Yeah.
Who do we have here? Talk to me.
Who said that?
Is that Arthur? Is that you?
Yeah, I can speak. Sure.
All right, you're going into Tucson soon.
Yeah.
Tell us what you want to do every day in prison.
Well, what I want to do in prison is go home. But besides that is I'm going to take the advice of everything I've listened to over a long period now, and I'm going to, of course, look for a job that gives me time to do my own work. I'm going to keep a journal, a very detailed journal that will also include the books that I read, and I've made an extensive book list already. Some of them are self-improvement books, some of them are skill books that might give me some benefit when I get out. I'll try to take whatever courses or education might be there, so that when I do go to my first meeting sometime at the end of the first month, that I can show them my release plan. And I'll be working my release plan also on a daily basis. So improve it and tweak it. So yeah, I mean, I'm going to be doing everything that we talked about. Really, it's going to be little tweaks on a daily basis, and I'll be doing exercise because I do it now. I'll just probably have a little bit more time for it, actually, in a certain sense. But I'm not going to be doing it all the time. But yeah, and I'll be staying clear of trouble. I'm going to be staying away from people that I think don't have my best interests in mind.
So to that end, and thank you for sharing, we're going to get more into the weeds today of life in prison, which means you have to prepare for that now. Mm-hmm. Before we do that, we're going to touch on jobs and exercise and some of those things today. Covered this yesterday, do so again today, because many of you were not on yesterday. When I was in prison, I met Michael Santos, who began to ask me some of these questions. I'm not going to go through all of them. You have access to this lesson plan, tips before surrendering to prison. You should be asking and answering these questions. Frankly, in many ways, I think our team thinks as you build your reentry plan, these are questions you can actually ask and answer for a case manager. So as Nate and Scott and Sam and everyone who's been home from prison knows, you're going to meet with a case manager by way of a team meeting within a month of your surrendering to prison. And in prison, they expect you to say to them, I have a job waiting for me. I want to get home, please. I didn't mean to do it. I didn't have bad intentions. That's what they can expect you to say, begging for something. And they may say, as they said to Sam or me, get out. You've got to show them why you're worthy of what it is you want, beyond the obvious of getting out of prison early, why you may be worthy of additional things in prison, a better bunk, a better job, things of that nature. So we encourage you to always be creating content. Nate is now home doing work in part because of content he created. Scott Laney, content. Sam is on our team, content. That content should be included in your reentry plan. So as you prepare to surrender to prison, all of you need to create your reentry plan before you show up, because you only have limited email and limited phone minutes in prison. Well, you have more email, but it costs money, and you don't want to be on that terminal all day, and you only have so many phone minutes. So the first step to preparing to prison, we think, is creating your reentry plan. We give it all away for free at Prison Professors. Templates of reentry plans we've sent you from Michael Santos. It's all free. You just have to invest the time to do the work. Create that reentry plan. That's number one before you go to prison. Now, in this reentry plan, you can begin to answer questions both for your network and for a case manager, right? How do you intend to document the journey? We're going to talk about that today. If you're going to make amends, if you pled guilty and you told your judge you're going to spend the rest of your life making amends, which is what most sentencing statements say, I'll never return to another courtroom, right? Even if you've been convicted at trial, you want to convey why you're never going to return to another courtroom. They call that happy talk. Judges have told us that. They don't think there's a lot of follow through. They think you're telling them what they want to hear, to be very honest with you. Therefore, for you to be different as you prepare for prison, I would begin to put yourself in the shoes of the stakeholders, a cynical judge and a case manager, by answering questions like these. In what ways will you invite the world to hold you accountable? How transparent will you make this strategy? Scott Laney did it by way of a website. Some clients don't want, or some people don't want websites. They'll send an email every Monday to their core links list with what they had done the previous week. We have a client that's like, I'm so burned out on my iPhone. I am so addicted to this device that I'm so excited to go. I'm so excited to be in prison and not have an iPhone that I am purposely not sending emails. So what are they doing? Good old pen and paper. No problem. Nothing wrong with writing a letter. But if you are not sharing with your network how you are making amends, if you are not sharing that with your case manager, if you are not planning to someday share that with the bureaucrat in the halfway house or your probation officer, then you're not prepared to go to prison. You're not prepared to master your time on the inside. So when we ask these questions, how transparent will you make it? Doesn't have to be online for the world to see. Probably a good idea if you have a destroyed reputation because of a DOJ release. May not be a bad idea to put out there what you're learning and how you'll become better. That's your choice. Either way, you've got to share the strategy with these bureaucrats who are going to determine when you get out. And Sam and I were discussing the webinar last week when someone said to us, hey, the webinars are great, but let me be clear. My goal to get out of prison as quickly as possible. That's why I'm on. We understand that, but we hope that it's more than just getting out early and that you become obsessed with having a productive journey. Because your experience on the inside is going to be harder on those that love and support you, as Nate and Scott and Sam and me and everyone who's been to prison can attest. So stop obsessing about just getting out early, because we can't guarantee that's going to happen. You may do everything we suggest by way of the reentry plan, a blog, a book, a website, waking early, writing, programming. You still may not get treated differently than the guy that watches the Kardashians all day in the library. Can't guarantee it. Regardless, we encourage you to do the work because we believe at some point it's going to influence somebody. Okay. Continuing on with these questions. How will your strategy show that you've worked hard to make amends? Well, I can assure you, Nate, who's on our call looking to get off probation early, whether his judge allows it or not, Nate has a strategy and a path that shows how he made amends for his conduct. Please, everyone, mute themselves. I'm begging you.
At the back door.
A moment. Okay.
Hey, man, I need some.
Okay. Thank you. So I'm going to turn it back over in a second, but I want to come back to this. Now, the first thing that I encourage all of you to consider as you're getting ready to go to prison is establishing a primary point of contact. Who will that person be? You should have a power of attorney set up before you go in, because although there are notaries in prison, they may not show up. It's COVID. We were supposed to have a notary every Tuesday. The person didn't show up for 6 weeks. I got fired from my bank, which we'll discuss in this webinar. They froze my account. It was a nightmare because I didn't have a power of attorney set up. So prior to going in, we encourage you have a primary point of contact, a power of attorney. Further, when you surrender, a question they ask you follows: who do we need to contact in case of an emergency? Now, sometimes that's off-putting to people because they're like, well, what's going to happen to me here? Why do I need to give you a name? You're required to give them a name. Establish who that person is. And unfortunately, anyone who's been to prison knows every now and again you hear someone getting paged down to camp control and they get some bad news from home. Someone may pass away, someone got hurt. It's just life. They need that contact. So be prepared to have that name before going to prison. Okay. Now, Scott and I, we discussed this a little bit yesterday. Who should take you to prison? Nate, I'm going to unmute you if you can contribute. I muted everyone. Let me see if I could.
Yeah.
Let me see.
Hear me?
Yes. Nate, if you can engage, and then Scott.
Absolutely.
I've said I made a mistake of surrendering to prison. My mom and brother. I wish I just went with my brother. Who took you to prison? Who did you go with? Nate?
My wife and my son wanted to take me, and it was not a great time for any of us. But after the fact, I mean, they said it was needed. So I really found out what they wanted to do. I mean, you helped me with that. And that was something you said. And, you know, the thing you kept reminding me of, and it was so true, that many days and times it's harder on them than it is on us when we're in there. And it stinks being in there, but, you know, the things that I left behind in my wake and the things that I didn't realize they were dealing with, but it did help them. So I asked them what they wanted, and that was what they wanted. I even tried to get them not to do it. But so my eldest and my wife dropped me off, and it was rough. It was a rough day, but it was good for us.
It's somewhat cathartic for some. I will remind all of you, a lot of these prison towns are broke and they need resources. They will give you a ticket in this community if you're going 2 miles an hour over the mile over the zone. That happened where I served time at Taft. It was 35 miles on this dirt road. If you were going 37 miles an hour, they would pull you over, and it's like a $300 or $400 ticket. These prison towns need resources. So drive to the prison slowly. If they tell you to get there at noon, I encourage you to get there at 10 o'clock. Scott mentioned yesterday, I think Sam has mentioned it as well, that if you get there at noon or right when you're supposed to surrender, they could be having lunch. There could be a switchover of guards, and you can end up waiting in the holding cell longer than is necessary. And it can delay you getting to the camp until 4, 5, 6 o'clock. We've had people who have had 2 o'clock report times. They get there at 1:58 against our advice. They sit in the hole overnight or the shoe until the guards process them in the next morning because the guards were getting ready to leave for work and they didn't want to do it or stay longer. So if it says noon, get there at 10, drive slowly. If you go in with someone, by the way, your letter from the BOP may say you're going to the penitentiary, like Lompoc, or it may say USP Lompoc, USP Leavenworth, USP Atwater. That means you're going to the camp, presuming you're minimum security and all that good stuff. Don't freak out if it says penitentiary. You surrender to the higher security prison, then work your way over to the camp. I share this with you so you can begin to condition your family for how long, for where you're going to serve, when you should get there. Now, I also want you to, we're going to do the calculator demonstration next week. As you may know, our team has spent a lot of time and money creating a calculator that factors in the First Step Act. We want you to manage expectations for your family on how long you may serve. And a lot of lawyers have good intentions, but they give bad advice. For example, we got a call from someone who got like a 60-month sentence, and the lawyer freaked out the family when he's like, oh, you're only going to get 15% good time. On 60 months, you're going to serve 51 months. And this defendant called us like, why are you guys putting misinformation out there, man? You need to be banned on Twitter. Why are you telling me 50? What's wrong with you people? And I'm like, the great thing is we just go by the law. So it's just the law that we're going to use to reflect how long. It's not what I think. Let's break down why 60 months, what it potentially could be. And his wife then hopped on the phone and she was crying with joy because she realized 60 months could really turn out to be, with RDAP, First Step Act, Second Chance Act, good time, it could be much shorter. To that end, Nate, you got a 33-month sentence. How long did you serve in prison?
10 months.
There you go. Scott, how long was your sentence and how long did you serve?
I had a 42-month sentence. I served 13 and a half months.
Right. So I want all of you, as you prepare to surrender to prison, to manage expectations of your family. Mom, dad, wife, son. I got 36 months. It ain't 36 months. I got 24. It really isn't. Let me tell you what that means. You've got to do that because they're going to be freaked out when they hear 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7 years in prison. Managing expectations is something. And on the flip side, too, there are people that get sentenced to 3 years and they're like, oh, because of the First Step Act, I'm eligible for release within 2 weeks. And they think they're going to go to prison in 2 weeks. People are laughing, but it happens. They surrender to prison and then 2 weeks later, they think they're going to be released. They have poorly managed expectations of the family. Then the family calls us and they're like, Trump signed this law in 2018, the First Step Act. Why is my husband still in prison? He's been there 3 weeks on a 4-year sentence. Let's just manage expectations, both good and bad. Okay, as crazy as it may seem. But also, people believe things online, and just because it's online doesn't mean that it's true. There's someone who called and was told to show up drunk because they want to get into the drug program.
Okay.
Terrible, dumb, stupid advice.
Don't do that.
Follow our path, follow the resources that we give you at no cost. You'll be in a better position, we think, to succeed. As you prepare to surrender, you should be forming a contact list. Sam, how many people can go on the list?
30 people for phone and email.
30 people for phone and email. And in the email system, you can email everybody at once, right? So you can just click everyone.
Yes.
Okay. And did you surrender with your contact list?
Well, if you remember, I was remanded into custody right after my sentencing, got out, self-surrendered 45 days later. But because I got there too late in the day, on a Friday, was taken to the SHU because my paperwork wasn't there and not taken into the camp until Monday. So I took nothing. They let me take nothing.
Sam's a great.
Justin, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, I was going to say, before you ask the question, Sam should be like that Seinfeld episode with George Costanza where you do the exact opposite.
Yeah.
I want all of you to do the exact opposite of what's. That's what we need. The summer of George. We need the summer of Sam. Do the exact opposite. Glenn, did you have a question?
Yeah, quick question. So I started doing my Excel spreadsheet for my contact list. Do you have to have the address, email, phone number of each contact, or can you just do like an email and name? If you have to have the full.
Go ahead,
So
Sam.
let me answer that, Justin. Each facility I'm learning is different in what their requirements are. Some, in order to build a contact list, you simply need name, phone number, and email. For some reason, other facilities, and there's no consistency, require the person's address as well in order to complete the contact list. So I don't know what Scott and what Nate's experience was. I know in Miami, it was strictly name, phone number, email. But other facilities do require a physical address.
Montgomery was address you had to add to it.
Now, they may not confirm the exact address, do they? Like if
No,
you get,
they don't.
it may be like unlike a visitation form where they do a background check and all that stuff. It may be different for email, right?
Right. It was at Montgomery. If it wasn't the right address, that it did not appear to be confirmed. I would
Okay.
just say don't use the same address for every person.
Okay, perfect.
Thank
Now,
you.
now something that as we go to number 3, I want everyone to fully understand the financial implications, and there are many, including if you have not already been fired by your bank, there's a really good chance that you will be fired. Has anyone here been fired from the bank? We're all together. We're brothers here in this process. I know. So I got fired. Unfortunately, spouses often get fired, and it's frustrating. So we encourage you, much like we encourage you to cultivate relationships with your network, stay in touch with them. I open several bank accounts. And I would even do it before you go to prison we have a number of people in our community, they will have a separate bank from their wife because just got to pay bills and whatnot. And there are times they fire everyone. We had a tragic story a year and a half ago or so where someone had a 7-figure retirement account and unfortunately was going through a very bitter divorce with his wife. And the wife was just non-responsive to his needs in prison. And unbeknownst to him, because he didn't have a power of attorney, they sent him notification that we fired you. It was, I think, Raymond James, and he didn't know to liquidate his account. And he was like 50 years old. And they liquidated his stocks and sent him a check. And that's a taxable event because he wasn't 59 and a half years old. And it was technically an early distribution from his retirement account. And it was a total nightmare. So the power of attorney is key. Establishing relationships is key. And be prepared to get fired now in prison or when you come home. I've been fired by 6 banks over the years. Don't complain. It's just part of the journey. It's all fine. Open up a lot of bank accounts. To the financial implications, restitution as well. If you owe it, pay it. Some of you may get, even at your sentencing, be told that you don't have to make restitution payments in prison per the order. If your case manager wants you to pay it. And it's crucial that you pay it. You can't tell the judge you want to make amends and build a reentry plan that says, I want to make amends, and then complain about $50 a quarter. You'll look stupid. Pay the money. However, and I read this email yesterday, I won't read it again, but I'll summarize to you. Someone reached out, said they had a 12-month sentence, estimated they would spend $500, $400 a month or something. They surrendered with $5,500 to prison, and the case manager took all of it for restitution. What's the takeaway? Don't surrender with all of your commissary at one time. They're going to take it. Get past your first team meeting where they'll see how much has come in. And then at the next team meeting, most likely, which could be 3 or 6 months down the road, they'll look at how much has come in and they'll put you up on a new payment plan. But That was very frustrating for that person. He claims to be suing the BOP, and it's bad. It's just bad. Okay. So we'd encourage you to surrender with $200 or $300. You can go with cash. If they don't let you you're not supposed to go with cash, but sometimes they'll let you take it in. If they don't let you take it in, you can hand it back to the person who walked you in along with your ID. Okay. And these are things you want to get out of the way now, including medications. If you are on medications, we encourage you to surrender with perhaps maybe Scott or Sam or Nate have different. I always say a week or so of medications because they're going to transition you to their generics. Is that about right?
Yeah, about a week, but bring it in the original bottles, the original prescription bottle.
Okay. In the original prescription bottles, we're not physicians here. Nate is a doctor, but we are not physicians here. But we encourage you to speak with your doctor about and go through the BOP formulary list because you get an idea of what they may transition you to. Because they're going to probably give you a generic. There's also the reality that you may be taking something now they actually won't give to you once you're there. And some people get there and they say, like, I don't need this anymore. And then if it's in your PSR, you surrendered with it, they can call you into medical frequently to confirm that you no longer need it. So it's just speak with your doctor about medications. But we have received calls from distressed wives telling us, my husband's in prison. He's been on this medication for a long time. He's really struggling with the generic, and he's in prison, and he's dealing with a quarantine, and he's only taking 3 showers a week due to the quarantine. And they're like, I thought this was supposed to be club fed. It's prison. There's aspects of this experience that are uncomfortable. And to the extent that you can mentally prepare for it and your family, it's better. Because what we don't want is for you to call home and complain and make it harder for them. And there are some prisoners that do that. They feel forgotten about. We tend to complain to those we are closest with, and they'll just call and complain and lament. And before you know it, it's even harder on the family. I hate to tell you to lie, but just fake it till you make it. Things are great. I'm one day closer to home. I'm really adjusting well. Can't wait to see you at our next visit. Keep that in mind every time you make a phone call from prison. Okay.
Justin, can I ask you just one quick
Yeah,
question?
of course.
So I have type 1 diabetes, and with that, I have a pump, an insulin pump. And so I'm just curious if you or anybody else is aware of whether that's allowed rather than being on the short acting or long acting insulin.
I saw insulin pumps being used in Miami.
And as you know, Casey, we retain and interview subject matter experts, including a former healthcare. I want to get exact clarity. Sam's correct, but also I want to get clarity if there's issues and whatnot. So let me inquire on that. But I believe Sam to be correct. But we want to make sure that you have everything you need, including CPAP machines as well. If any of you, I think you can surrender with a CPAP. If that's what's called CPAP, if any of you have sleep app, you can surrender with that as well, right?
Yes, they could at Montgomery. And about the pump, check with your doctor, because if you want to go on the long acting, I saw guys that had it, they got it taken from them. Healthcare in there, as Justin's probably told you, is not top of the list for everyone. So like he said, get with your doctor before, look at anything else that you could be on, and just prepare for it. I mean, if you don't prepare, they don't care. I mean, we have to prepare, like he says. So whatever you can look at, get with your doctor first. I would.
And Justin, quick question on the
Glenn, hold on 1 second before I answer that.
Okay.
In case that comes back to point number 2, establishing the primary point of contact.
Mm-hmm.
Scott and I joke and laugh about this. There are people that will be writing cop-outs, which is a request to staff for some of the most ridiculous things ever. I want better peanut butter. I need better running shoes. Why don't you have the half size for me? I got a good laugh out of Nate as well. It's ridiculous. That's not when you go to staff.
No.
But you could go to staff if medically you're not getting treated.
Yes.
We've had spouses as the primary point of contact say, this may be harder for my husband in prison. I'm sorry, but he's not getting his health issues met. I'm going to call every single day, and I'm going to write to my congressperson,
Yes.
my politician. I'm going to show up to their office, and it's like all hands on deck because my husband's not getting the proper treatment in prison. So you want to do it diplomatically. There is a chance you email staff, you will never hear from them. You keep calling. We've had people call the prison. One time it rang for 2 hours straight. It was actually our friend and someone in our community said, I'm just not going to hang up. I just want to see how long it will ring. And after 2 hours calling the camp, it was still ringing. Okay. So we just want you to prepare for obstruction, that indifference, but that contact can help you advocate, Casey, if God forbid you're not getting your medication, which is why you need updating your medical records is important. letters. We have had doctors send letters directly to the case manager or to the doctor. So there are times you go to staff. It's not if you don't like the peanut butter or the shoes. It's medically, I'm not getting treated, things of that nature. Okay. Even as you do visitation, some staff members don't want to approve your visitation list, even though the forms are sitting right there in front of them and it would take 6 minutes, but they kind of get a rise out of watching you complain. Okay. Just some patience as best you can, and then you can push. Eventually it will happen. We just want you to pick your battles wisely. Glenn, what's your question?
So it was just kind of a point too. So in another guy asked about the medication. So you can check the BOP formulary list as well.
Yep.
And I'm in December. I surrender in January, but in December, like my doctors, I'll have like 3 months of my prescriptions and the actual written prescription, and I'll have the actual medication. I don't know what all will get in, but I was going to take that with me in January when I surrender. Is that okay, Justin? Think that's okay to do, to take it with me with the prescription and the medicine?
Yeah, as Sam said, you want to bring the actual prescription, and all of that is listed in your probation report already, which they'll have access to. Do not surrender with your probation report. But yes, you want to surrender with those medications. And
I had my doctor change when I had him look at the list, and so we changed my medications to the products that are on the formulary.
Those are things you want to go through with your doctor. Hopefully the BOP formulary list is correct and updated. Sometimes they're behind, but that's why you work with your physician. So I think that's good. Now, continuing, as you prepare to surrender to prison, you understand how to send yourself money. We have that whole process as well. You can send money via Western Union or send money to the PO box in Iowa. We've sent all of that to you. If
Justin,
not,
can I say something? Make sure that person on the outside knows how to do it as well. Because
to send money?
yes.
Yeah.
The
So
person that you said, make sure, because if something goes on, just like you said, we had the same thing happen in Montgomery. Guy brought a ton of money in. They took it all. His wife didn't know how to do it. Wasn't getting to him. So it was just a fiasco. So go over that with the person outside as well.
that's right. So this link, how to send money to prison. We've sent this to you if you need us to resend it. In fact, Sam or someone, perhaps you can put this in the chat for everyone to access, but this is actually how someone can go to bop.gov, send you money. If someone could copy this link, or I can, whatever. Very simple explanation on how to send money. You can send $300 the first time. It comes with a fee, or you can just send a stamp, use the PO box in Iowa. I encourage you to do that. We have also filmed videos on what the email system looks like. So your family, when they get your Core Links invitation, knows how to respond. Many of them go to the junk or email folder. So they should be looking for that as well. But we have filmed all of these videos and sent them to you. As you prepare to surrender to prison, I'd give thought to how much you want to spend every month. We have clients that spend $100 a month, some that spend $1,000 a month, $500. I spent $500 a month in prison. Michael spent more because he was a prolific writer and he was on the email machine all day writing books and writing and doing things, as you know. So you should give thought to what it is, how much that you want to spend every single month. You do have, I think it's $360 in the commissary. That is exclusive of stamps, email, phone. So you can see how easily you can spend $500 or $600 a month in prison. Some prisoners do have money go to other inmates' books. That's a decision you have to make. Consequences follow that. I think we're going to touch on the quadrant theory here in a little bit, but you should be forming a budget now, knowing you're not going to surrender with too much money the first month. I'd go in with a few $100s.
Justin, are you telling them also pre-fill out your commissary list now, send it to yourself, because when you get in there, you may go to commissary the first day or the second day, or it may be a week, and your head's going to be spinning a little bit, and it really was helpful. That was something you told me to do, Justin, before I went in. It was really helpful because you're not thinking about it, and you got guys around you and everybody, you're just, and you usually only get to go to commissary that once a week. I mean, we did. So as you prepare to surrender, those are absolutely things that you can do if you just go to bop.gov locations. Yep. I'm sure all of you have done this. I typed at Montgomery because Nate served his sentence at Montgomery. And you'll see here, there should be the commissary list here. Yeah. All that stuff right here. Yep. That's a good idea. Do they break up the 360 where you can only spend 180 at a time? You can't do the whole thing. You could spend the whole thing at once. But with the way that the pandemic and all the things they're doing now, they break it up then. They were breaking it up.
And by the way, I think even if you can spend more, I'd encourage you to be diligent because it could be off-putting to prisoners if you're like asking asking 6 dudes like, hey, can you carry this back to my dorm? And they have $50 a month coming in.
Oh, it is
Be aware-
off-putting.
Be aware of your surroundings, study, watch, listen, be very, be very cautious. Things to think about when they ask you about your sentence. I wouldn't lie, but you are under no obligation to tell them while you are there. We had an unfortunate situation where someone in our community, who thankfully on an 8-month sentence is getting out after just 2.5 months or so due to the CARES Act. He did a very good job of advocating for himself. But unfortunately, they asked him if he cooperated and he said yes.
Oh.
And you just, even in a camp, it really led to problems.
Yeah, don't do it.
You're under no obligation to tell people while you're there, but I wouldn't lie about the length of your sentence. It's going to get out that you can just, people ask me, I'm here for 18 months. Why are you here? Hey man, I just got to prison. I've been fighting this for a long time. I'm really not in the mood to talk about my case. Part of why I responded that way was because it wasn't their business. But also, what did our parents teach us in kindergarten? Reciprocity. If they ask me and I answer, I then need to ask them. And I really didn't care. So I would just be very direct. Hey, man, I don't want to talk about my case. Hope you understand. Thanks. And if they didn't, I didn't care. I didn't see any violence there. The highest value is boredom. The lion's share of guys who said they didn't cooperate, ironically did. It's whatever. Okay. It's none of their business. But if you engage them, and you feel required to respond to them because you can't say no, or you think you have to, or they gave you some granola when you got there, you're not making the best decisions. Okay,
can I say something about that too?
Yeah.
Make sure if you get something from somebody, and those first days to me were fine to do that with, because they come in, everybody remembers where they were. But if you get something, offer something back. I mean, that is something. And if you were to give something, get something back. But the biggest thing in that is if you get something from somebody but you've never bought it on commissary, they can count that as contraband, because they can go through your commissary list to see what you bought. Guys in our compound were trading mackerel, Max. And, if you've never bought Max, but you had a locker full of Max and they're trying to look and find where the gambling ring is or what it is, you may never have gambled in your life, but just be very careful on that.
That really comes down to the understanding of your environment, right?
Yes.
There are people in prison who they like to impress, assert their authority, the money they made, the jets they flew on, the deals they did. Michael coined this phrase in prison. He coined the guy Roman Fabrizi. I wish he'd film a video on it. Roman Fabrizi is the guy that talks about how rich he is and the deals he did, but he's asking to borrow money from you to buy shoes in the commissary. Okay, so there's a lot of people who try to show off and impress, and people become enamored by that, and they get sucked into that world and they're not productive. Now, step number 5, and then we're going to get, once I cover step 5, well, actually step 4 and then step 5, I'm going to cover 2 specific things, the quadrant theory and jobs in prison. Because that I got some messages on that, and I think it's important as you prepare for prison. I'd encourage all of you to form a book list. I've shared this story before. It was funny when Michael used to ask me in prison what I was reading. I would tell him, he's like, give me a summary of it. I couldn't. He's like, well, man, you might as well be watching a movie. It was true. I wasn't reading books that related to the life that I wanted to live in prison and when I went home. And that changed. And then from there, I only began reading marketing, philosophy, and ethics books, and a lot of books about stoicism. So now the books that are in my office are books I've read in prison and now. So you should be forming, as you prepare to surrender to prison, a book list. I believe you can create an Amazon list, share it with people. They can send the book to you. When you're done with the book, you can send it home or do what I did. You donate it to the library. Great. Okay, I think you can have 5 books in your locker. Some have more. I never saw a guard really enforce it. Also, some of you should contemplate if you want to keep your locker locked in prison. I never locked my locker, though recently someone went to staff to say their locker was broken into. It was a huge mistake. He's now being ostracized in the prison because they say he's a tattletale. He should have kept his mouth shut or locked his locker. Yeah. Scott, did you lock your locker? Never. I mean, go take the mackerel. I don't care. Nobody would. It would be stealing. It would be a huge problem. Who the hell knows? I was like, go into my locker if you need something. I don't care. It was like wide open. You can take it. No, nothing was stolen, but it could happen.
Justin, right? to your point about the gentleman who went to staff, you really should go to other inmates for as much as you can. That means when you're new there and you have questions about how certain things work or what processes look like, if you find yourself asking the COs those questions, people are just going to look at you like you're crazy. Ask the inmates there, get to know them. It's just, they're there to monitor you, but they're not there to be your friends. They're not there to answer your questions. You can rely on the other guys you're serving time with for far more than you anticipate.
That's exactly right. Speaking with staff, there's no upside. So as you prepare for prison, and I asked earlier, what will the day look like? That day should include, we think, not speaking with staff. Now, if they open the door, you can say thank you. But I say frequently, if you haven't watched the video on the webinar on disciplinary infractions, you are not prepared for prison because you don't understand how one thing can derail your experience. When I was in prison, there was a gentleman who is, I think, the most successful class action lawyer in America. I think he was down in San Diego, like hundreds of millions of dollars. And he ended up going to prison, I think, for shorting people of their settlement. Anyway, I think he had season seats for the Raiders or the Rams or something. Maybe he lived in LA. And one day he was just striking up a conversation with the guard. Why? I have no idea. Well, I can tell you why. Some prisoners better identify with guards, law-abiding citizens, than perhaps the prisoners, the common criminal. They don't see themselves as criminals, so it's easier to identify with a guard. Okay. And in this case, he's like, they're talking about football. And he just very kind of nonchalantly said, hey, I'm in prison. If you want my Rams tickets, you can have them. He didn't have bad, but hold on, he didn't have bad intentions. He thought the guard was his friend. He's in prison. No one can use the Rams tickets. And the guard thought that he was offering him a bribe. Before you know it, as I recall, he's in the shoe. He gets transferred to a higher security prison. He loses his good time. And he's like, I thought we were just having a conversation. No upside in speaking to staff unless you absolutely have to. Coming back, creating a deliberate book list. This is more vital than ever because you're going to want to build this reading and book list into your reentry plan. So the reentry plan is a dynamic growing document. So even though it should be created before you go to prison, it will grow while you're in prison because you're going to be writing about programs that you're benefiting from, book reports that, books that you're reading. You don't have to do a book report. We encourage it. Scott did more than 50 book reports while he was in prison. They're all on his website for the world to see. Okay. But I think it's a great way for you to stay engaged with your network. I mean, how great would it be if every Monday or every Monday or every Friday, your network got an email from you that said, hey guys, I miss you. I love you. Let me tell you what I did over the last week. I ran 50 miles. I attended this program and I read 2 books. Here's a book report that I wrote. I wrote 2 letters to my probation officer. I'm working on a business plan. Here's a snippet from it. I'd love some feedback from you. So grateful for your support. I'm going to be home soon. I'm getting stronger every day. Welcome your feedback. I love you. By the way, if you'd like to visit, let's talk about. I mean, that is so inspiring to people. You can do that via core links every single week, but you need content. Okay. We talk a lot about content. People are going to get tired if you say, I got up at 5, I went to the chow hall, I ran, I went to the library and I slept. After about 3 days, they're going to say, please stop emailing me or you will get no more responses. It's got to be full of engaging content based on what you're learning. So we encourage you before you go to prison to establish a very deliberate reading list, and that those books should relate to the life you want to live, right? If you want to be a salesman, read sales books, whatever it is. But we encourage you to read books that aren't just passing time like John Grisham and things like that. It's that you might just watch the movie. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't have some downtime. Guys used to give Michael Santos a tough time about that. Like, dude, you never relax. You get up at 1 a.m. All you do is work. I was like, I'm serving 26 years in prison. I have to prepare for the life that awaits me on the other side. They'd be like, you need to relax and decompress. Michael viewed it differently. He was all day, every single day. I had a little bit of downtime, but only if I felt I earned it, right? So that could be watching some golf on a Sunday or things of that nature, but feel as if you've earned it. I beg you. So you should be writing book reports, building them into your reentry plan and sharing them with your network. But also it's very helpful because in my case, I didn't even have email. And when I would read books, I would take notes, handwrite and send it home to my mom because there wasn't email at the time. And I would send the notes home to her and she would, can you see my screen with this book report, everyone?
Yeah.
Okay. So like I would read a book. There's a great book I read in prison called Why Good People Do Bad Things. And as many of you know, I wanted to build a career as an ethics and compliance speaker, but I wasn't going to do that if I couldn't tell my story. So I read, 48 Laws of Power, Ayn Rand. I read Why Good People Do Bad Things, a lot of John Maxwell, lessons on leadership, things like that. And I would handwrite and send this home. My mom would type it and send it back to me. And if you were to speak with Michael Santos, he would say to you, there were days that Justin sat next to me in a quiet room for 8 hours. And all he did was memorize things in his book reports. That's all he did. I would memorize this and then Michael would test me. He'd say, talk to me about courage for 3 minutes. Talk to me about humility for 3 minutes. Talk to me about discipline for 3 minutes. And we would just go back and forth and back and forth. I could only do that because I was reading books, putting them on my website and studying these notes. And frequently I share these in a lecture. I gave a large lecture a few days ago to CB Richard Ellis, and I said something akin to this: you may succeed in keeping your flaws alive for a while. I did. Someday it will come crashing down. Do not wait for pain and shame to become the catalyst that evokes change. I got that from a book. The point is, read books that relate to the life you want to live when you go home. I'm begging you. And also share with your probation officer, your case manager, your wife, your kids, your daughter, your friends, whomever. I don't care. Just freaking share it. And you're going to inspire people. And that's how you get people back into your network. Read books with a purpose. I'm absolutely begging you. And also do more than read. You have to write. Reading's a passive activity. It's great. I believe you have to write and share it. I would do a website, or I would do a blog on the website, or I would do once a week via core links. Michael Santos here has put 10 books that he recommends reading. His book here, if you'd like a free copy of Earning Freedom, we'll send it to you. We'll send you the PDF. We have already. Happy to send it again. But these are books that he recommends, and you can tell they relate to the life he wanted to live, right? Better Writing, Elon Musk, Google, leading about the best businesses in the world, Stoicism, Ryan Holiday. I'm now reading the Shoe Dog book, which is excellent. Okay. This is a great book too. Start with Why. I'm listening to this audiobook. I also really recommend Atomic Habits by James Clear. Phenomenal book. I'm both reading and listening to that book as well. So form your book list, write book reports, and then really create a detailed journaling and writing plan. Okay. Why are you reading the book? How is it helping you in prison? How will it help you upon your release from prison? Now, I will tell you, some people said it was corny and cheesy to do that. The last thing you should care about is what guys think about you in prison.
Yeah.
Just do it, man. Just do it. Just do it. If not, you're not going to just be so obsessed about getting out early, which is what I know all of you want. But as I've said before, in the totality of your life, if you get out a month or 6 weeks later, in the totality of your life, does it really matter? No. What matters is what happens when you come home, because a good percentage of the people that reach out to us, they're struggling. They don't know what to do. And that's in large part because they weren't prepared for prison, and they didn't have a proactive routine while in prison. And they all kind of wish like to do the experience over. Okay. Mm-hmm. So with that said, I want to turn over to two things. I want to talk about jobs in prison. Casey, Arthur. Casey, Casey, talk to us about what type of job you envision, and then I'll have some insights. In other words, do you want to work a little? Do you want to work a lot? Help us understand that.
Justin, I'm assuming you're referring to me.
Yes.
Okay. So you're asking me what job
you want to do. You're going to have 18. If you sleep for 8 hours, you're going to have 16 hours a day. You could find a job that's 30 minutes. You can find a job that's 9 hours. What type of job do you want to have in prison? You need to be preparing for this before you go in. What type of job do you want? What do you want to do?
So if I had if it were up to me, I would teach. I'm just an avid reader. I've been to school for all of the sorry, I'm trying to gain my thoughts here.
Sure.
So to that, I'm going to answer your question, but I also have another question about that. So obviously, I know I shouldn't assume that going into that I can say, hey, I want to teach a class on business, but insofar as what is available, how do you even go about? Because I know there are required jobs, but then how does that morph into?
So let me answer that. And if Nate or Scott or Sam or anyone or Scott, good to see you, Scott. If you want to, for your insights, this is what I suggest. It may take some time before you clear what's called A&O, right? Admissions and orientation, I think it's called. So during that time, you should, that week or two, you should be walking around the compound looking for a job that may interest you. Now, when I was in prison, all new prisoners who were young and healthy enough went to the kitchen for 120 days. And I remember I was walking around the compound. I found a job opening in the library. I went to my case manager, put in a request. She started laughing. In fact, I'll never forget. I filmed a TikTok video about this where like this vein was bulging out of her neck. She was laughing so hysterically. And she's like, how old are you? And I said, I'm 33. She's like, get out. You're going to the kitchen. So I went to Michael Santos. I'm like, damn, I'm going to the kitchen. So he's like, okay, you can, he's like, is that what you USC people do? You just give up so quickly? I'm like, easy, man, take it easy. So Michael's like, Michael's like, that guy over there assigns jobs in the kitchen, this guy Baker. He was bald with a ponytail. He played bocce ball all day. She's like, why don't you go over to Baker, who assigns the jobs in the kitchen, and get the best of the worst job before he assigns you the worst job in a week or something like that. So I was proactive. I went to Baker, his name, it was Baker, and he worked in the kitchen. And he said, here's what's open. You could be a baker at 4:30 a.m. You can do the buffet line 3 times a day, every other day. You can do pots and pans in the morning or evening. I did pots and pans in the afternoon and the evening so I could exercise in the morning, and I didn't want to serve food standing up. Okay. So my point is this: before you get assigned a job, Casey or anyone, walk around the compound, look for a job that could be open. You could put in a request for it. They may or may not approve it. I ask about jobs because some prisoners, this is the key point of this conversation. Some people want to work like 8 or 9 hours a day to feel busy, where they don't feel like they're in prison. Others find, like me, do their job. You will be offered a chance to pay someone to do your job. Others, like me, I wanted to work the minimum, an hour, and then eventually it was 15 minutes, believe it or not, sweeping floors, but I did my job. The problem, if you find a job that's an hour and you don't have a writing plan or a reading plan, and you're not growing your network and you're not productive, like you'll literally, like, you'll feel like a life sentence. You'll be just begging for mail call, watching paint dry. So that's the point I want you to take. If you're going to find a job that's an hour a day, great. Make sure you're productive. You can put in to teach. Some of our clients teach. It didn't happen for many months. And Sam, maybe you have some thoughts on this. They had their job. They volunteered to teach a class. The case manager said, put up a note in education, see if people come. They did. Some ended up doing it for their job, like helping people get their GED. Some still did their job and volunteered, and then build that into the release plan. The takeaway is, if you're going to work all day, fine, to stay busy. Understand the consequences that follow if you're not really prepared to go home because you want the time to pass. Sam, what was your job in prison? Was it a lot or a little?
So day one, it was the kitchen. Day two, they fired me. And because I also had, I had a soft shoe pass. So you can't work in the kitchen with a soft shoe pass. So instead, as an avid cyclist, there were 3 spin bikes out back, and I was the only guy who rode. I was out there at 5 o'clock every morning. So I created my own job. I was in charge of making sure the spin bikes were in good order. They didn't care as long as you had a job and they could mark you down. In my case, it was rec. I had a job in rec. So I was on the bikes for 3 hours a day. I got paid for 3 hours a day, and that was my job. Everybody gets put in the kitchen right away. But if you have a soft shoe pass, which is what I had, you're not allowed to work in the kitchen. So that's why after day one, I was fired.
So these are things I want you to think about. So Arthur, when you ask, how do you request a job? Before you get assigned a job, you can walk around the compound, see if there's an opening, and then put in a request to your case manager. They may say yes or no. We've had clients who have put in that request and they're like, okay, there's an opening for you to be an orderly, emptying trash. They'll apply it. You can be proactive. If they say no, then you just say no, fine. But even if they say you're going to the kitchen, try to position yourself to get a job in the kitchen that's desirable. Shar, I see your hand up in the top left.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm 68 years old. I'm scheduled for back surgery December 1st, and I go into prison January the 6th. I have a couple of questions, Justin. First of all, I don't even know what kind of job I can do. I haven't worked in a long time. I got health issues, and I just been taking care of my husband and myself. He's a cancer patient, and he also has, just had his kidney removed a few years ago. What kind of job can I do? And also, what they're going to close my bank account, will I be getting kicked out of our bank? I got Social Security and a small pension coming in.
So I encourage you to watch the earlier part of this webinar where we covered that. To go to the last part first, there is a chance your bank will fire you. We encourage you to establish relationships.
Okay.
With the number of banks. Not a guarantee, by the way. It's kind of strange how it happens. We had someone in our community plead guilty to money laundering, which you could argue is probably the worst for a bank. And somehow, some way, he's still with Bank of America, which is the quickest to fire you. I told him it's a matter of time. So establish a number of relationships with banks. We encourage you to even create separate banking relationships from your spouse, because sometimes they'll fire the spouse. So just I encourage you to do that. to the job, the value of the probation report is for that reason. If you're a little older or you have some health issues and you're on medications, all of that is going to be disclosed in the probation report, which is what your case manager will have access to. Further, the day you surrender to prison, you'll meet with a doctor or a physician's assistant or someone like that, and you will express to them any medical issues that you have, any ailments.
Okay.
They're going to see that perhaps you're a little bit older. So for that reason, the BOP cares about a couple of things: security of the institution and keeping costs down. So I can assure you, they're not going to throw you into the kitchen doing pots and pans where you can hurt your back and they're going to get hit with a huge lawsuit. The BOP has enough problems, but it does require you to be proactive in articulating what you can and cannot do. When I was in prison, there's an 85-year-old man who was there for like 3 months. Why a judge would send him to prison for 3 months is a different question. But his job was to, he handed out the kosher food. So you would walk in, literally, when you're on the kosher menu, the guard has a checklist. I'm on the kosher menu. The guard would check it off. He would walk over, the guard would open it out of the refrigerator. He would then hand it to the 85-year-old, and then the 85-year-old who was in a wheelchair would then hand it to the prisoner. That was like, that was his job, but he really wanted to work.
I think I could do that.
That would be a good job.
Hey, Shar, I've got some insight for you.
Thank you.
Jonathan, can you mute your phone, buddy?
Thanks. Yeah.
Shar,
I'm going to mute him. I'll do it. Go ahead.
Shar, just to maybe ease some of your concerns, one thing I was really impressed and blown away by in federal prison is the way that the inmates rallied around some of the older inmates who maybe had some health issues, weren't able to work as hard. There was so much support and so much camaraderie. I think you probably won't have any issues in terms of what type of job you get or what's asked of you that you're not comfortable with, and you'll probably be pleasantly surprised by the support the other people there give you.
Thank you. Thank
Char,
you guys so much.
Char, you mentioned Social Security. It's my experience that if you're on Social Security, it stops until you're out of the Bureau of Prisons and you start supervised release, at which point it will restart again. And depending upon restitution, that determines the amount you'll resume getting. So just understand if you're on Social Security, that typically will stop while you're in the Bureau of Prisons.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that, Sam. And also, someone left a comment, and I think it's part of why we do these webinars and we give everything away for free, is because we want to provide information and correct what you may have heard previously, including from some lawyers who have good intentions. I believe lawyers have good intentions, but they don't understand the Bureau of Prisons, the First Step Act. The reason we don't negotiate plea agreements is because we're not lawyers. It's same reason lawyers shouldn't give advice. For example, I think Josh wrote, I have a PhD in business administration. I was told it was a guarantee I would teach by the lawyer. Is that not true? Of course not.
No.
We want you to advocate. We want you to articulate to a case manager that you have an education and you would like to give back and contribute to your fellow prisoners. But to think that it's a guarantee is foolish and naive, and it's bad advice. So I just want to condition you for that. Now, we're always going to be honest with you, even if it's not the answer that you want. It could be your job. It may not be your job, but there is no guarantee that a case manager is going to say, wow, you have a PhD. That's phenomenal. How'd you like to avoid the kitchen and go teach? That's not logical within the BOP, but you should try. Sam, 9 people have asked what a soft shoe pass is. You've opened up a whole new can of worms. Suddenly people are going to develop foot issues based on your comment. Can you tell me?
So when you
Can
get
tell
there,
us what a soft shoe
Yes.
pass is?
soft shoe pass or alternative shoe pass, when you get there, they're going to give you a pair of these big black boots. You typically have to wear them during visits, during RDAP, if you take RDAP, during lunch, you have to wear this boot. When I got there, I complained of, I think I said plantar fasciitis. And the doctor said, okay, well, you can't wear boots. We're going to recommend an alternative shoe pass. I said, what is that? Well, you can wear sneakers 24/7. You do not have to wear boots. And by the way, you're now not allowed to work in landscaping, construction, or the kitchen. So an alternative shoe pass, there are 2 passes that I found were helpful for me. A lower bunk pass, because I prefer to lower bunk. Nothing like having to go to the bathroom at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, climbing off a bunk and trying to make your way to the bathroom in the dark. So a lower bunk pass and a alternative shoe pass, which is a soft shoe or sneaker pass, so that you can wear sneakers all of the time, as opposed to the big black boots. It also limits the jobs you can.
The other thing, Sam, real quick, there are inserts you can buy, Dr. Scholl's, at least you could, and it made those black boots so much easier to wear. That's the worst. Those black boots are terrible. But again, if you have to, but the soft shoe pass, if you can get it, get it.
Yeah.
But
that-
keep your pass with you, because if they think you're trying to game the system and they find you don't have your pass, you've got to keep it in your pocket. You may have seen that. I saw guys get busted on, especially RDAP guys. They're watching and they know everything you're doing on that.
They actually, on our IDs, put a little orange or blue circle, which indicated you had to pass.
Okay.
And something that I really appreciate the engagement. By the way, for everyone who's new to our community, Nate has been contributing. Nate was a client many, many years ago, and he from Tennessee, and he was at Montgomery for 33 months, and he got home in about 10 months, not due to COVID, just a lot of halfway house time in the drug program, and he's back in Tennessee.
Because of you guys.
Well, you're doing great. He's a dentist, and he does a lot of marketing now for dental firms, compliance and stuff. It's awesome. One thing I want to share as we wrap up this video, and we're going to get more into it next week, but I want you to start to think about it, okay? Which is, let me see if I can pull it up on my screen. One sec. Do you see this thing here that says quadrant theory?
No, it's just a
Here.
white
No.
screen.
Okay, hold on one second. I think we'll go through it more next week. Oh, here it is. Let me see if you can see quadrant theory right now.
Yes.
This was really transformative for me when Michael would ask me this in prison, because he would always evaluate my days, or he would encourage me to evaluate my days. And I've joked that some days I wanted to avoid him because I didn't want to answer how I had spent the day. But as you prepare for prison, think about this theory, high risk, low reward behaviors. To the extent that you can put yourself in a high reward, low risk environment, you're really mastering prison. So high risk, low reward, of course, is your writing, your reading, your exercising, right? If it's spiritual, if it's finding solitude. There are prisoners who will engage in the high risk, low reward, iPhones, TV all day, gambling, dominoes. So if you can approach your prison term as you prepare from this perspective, and I think what I found most was sort of low risk, low reward, sleeping, kind of walking the track all day, just really angry and depressed and mad at the world. Okay. The last thing I'll say before I wrap up this webinar, if you have fitness goals in prison, it's very disheartening when people come home from prison and after 3 months, 6 months, or a year, and they put all the weight back on. Oftentimes in a minimum security camp, the biggest goal for many is avoiding problems and getting fitter. And we've had people in our community lose 100 pounds, and a year and a half later, they put 150 back on. They lose 30 pounds, they put 70 back on. Because in prison, you can walk the track for 9 hours a day, right? But when you come home, you can't walk the track for 9 hours a day, 8 hours a day. So I would encourage you, as you prepare for prison, to one, begin exercising now in dosages you hope to maintain in prison. If that's 2 hours, if it's 3 hours, something that you can do when you come home, because it's very, very hard with wine and food, and you're back, man. You're just back. You can live. And if you haven't cultivated good eating habits, or if you can't continue to exercise for 8 hours, it all comes back on. And I've received a lot of calls over the years from people who are like, I'm just so devastated. I'll never have a chance to do it again. I went to a fat farm for a while and I've given it all back. I'm devastated. Now I work a full-time job, work dinners 4 nights a week. Damn, I wish I could go back for 6 months. People actually say that to us. So I want you to think about that as you prepare for prison. Exercise and dosages you can maintain I would probably say a little more. If you can do 3 hours a day in prison, 50% at least when you come home, an hour and a half, right? And Sam is he's a cyclist. He's also a professional pickleball player. So but he's active. 3 hours probably still a day. Scott, I joke about my chubby cheeks. I have a cookie I put on 5 pounds, but I still run 80 miles a month. That began in prison. Exercise and dosages you can maintain when you come home, or else you're going to be devastated if you wake up one day and you've given it all back. I really want to make that clear. That said, any questions we haven't answered, or anything else we can address?
Michael?
What is supervised release like?
Hey, Scott,
Josh, you asked what a supervised release like. That'll be a whole webinar of supervised release, how to get off early or try to, how to nurture a relationship with your probation officer from prison, how to have higher levels of liberty on probation. We've had clients go to Argentina, Canada, Europe, Mexico. We'll talk about that. That kind of ties into the release plan. So we're going to talk about that. Someone asked, do they keep the GPS on your ankle? Do you mean when you're on probation?
On home confinement.
I
On
guess
home confinement, yes, they do.
And every district is different. When I was at the halfway house here in Hollywood, they didn't. But I know Michael was in the halfway house in San Francisco for a year. He had an ankle thing on the whole time. I think it depends on the district a little bit. I didn't. So it kind of depends on the halfway house and that district. Any other questions?
Yeah, Mike, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm Justin, but yes, I'm logged into Michael's Zoom.
Okay, so that was one of the questions I had. All right, so the second question I have is halfway. If you have a resident, go to the resident, possibly go to the.
I can't hear you.
If you have a residence,
Okay,
are you going to go line up at
I know what his question is. Did you hear it,
okay, go
Justin?
ahead. Yeah,
So
please
he's
answer.
asking if you're released early, do you have to go to a halfway house? If you have a residence to go home to, can't you go right to home confinement? Correct, John?
Yes.
So
Depends on where
I
they
can
send
answer
you.
it. Scott can answer it. When I was released directly to home confinement. I was on home confinement for 14 months. A lot of it depends on your release plan and the district you're in, the capacity of the halfway house. Usually, I think my story is a little more unusual. Usually, they do put you in the halfway house for a period of time before they let you in onto home confinement. But there's, it depends on the halfway house, the capacity.
Mhm.
Do they have the ability to monitor you on home confinement? Remember, it's a money-making opportunity for the halfway house. So there's a lot of variables. But Scott, I think you had a different experience.
I did. I think it comes back to the humility aspect of this again and again. Is I strolled into the halfway house thinking, well, look at me, I own a home. I'd just like to go home, put the ankle monitor on me. They don't care. You're a number, you're a file. There's a lot of paperwork that has to be processed. And I spent far more time in the halfway house than I would have liked to. But like most things with this entire journey, you just stay patient and you deal with it. So it's hard to say exactly what a case manager it's some random halfway house throughout America is going to do at a certain point in time. But I will say the more content you create, the more humility you have, the more patience you show, you're more likely to have a positive outcome if you've shown how you're working to differentiate yourself.
So quick question. So is the case manager at the halfway house, is that different than is that, do they get turned over to the case manager at the halfway house? Or is the case manager at the prison, when you get released, tell the halfway house what to do with you?
Well, for me, same role, just different facilities. So once I left the prison I was at in South Dakota, I had a new case manager at the one in Boise.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Mark. Michael, looks like you have a question.
Yeah, I need to do a better job of recognizing the very big yellow hand in front of me. Forgive me. You have let's see. Go ahead. You're, for some reason, your name isn't showing up, but you have a red hat on. Red hat on. Looks like you're in the car. Let's answer. The Nebraska. You're a Cornhusker. Forgive me.
Sure.
I'm ready for the question.
I asked it in the chat. I didn't know if anybody else had an opinion. I heard about the BOP bill on tablets in prisons. Anybody can elaborate further on that?
So if anyone wants to chime in, let me know. I know that some prisons have a lot of state facilities have tablets. I know some of them are going to be working their way into the BOP facilities that they have not already.
I think Scott answered that. Scott?
Go ahead.
Sure. Just varies facility to facility. We received them right as I was leaving. The challenge for me with the tablets is they cost so much, and it's not the financial outlay that gets you, but it's the fact that it eats up so much of your commissary for that month. And once you get into a flow and you start learning what you like to eat off of commissary, you go, I don't want to take half this money and buy a tablet. And it comes back to, what do you want to do to be productive? Do you want to play video games on a generic iPad, or do you want to read really engaging books and spend time writing and spend time exercising?
So there are tablets in these prisons.
It's coming. It came to us like 3 weeks before I left.
Okay.
But I imagine and probably Michael could speak to this more, in the coming months, they should be making their way into most camps, I would assume.
Yeah, but it is expensive. Just like the MP3 players, like $80, and does that go against your commissary?
It did go against commissary. I waited, I held strong for 5 months, and then I finally gave in on the MP3 player.
Yeah.
But the tablets could be because you can email on them, right?
It again depends on facility. And on ours, you couldn't yet, but I think that was something they were looking to activate in the coming months.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other Michael White question?
Yeah, this is actually for Nate. Nate, I'm trying to possibly get sentenced to Montgomery, and I was wondering if I could possibly talk to you sometime.
Absolutely.
I have sent you my phone number
Cool.
in the chat.
Okay.
If you can respond, maybe we can
I'll
set
get it.
something up.
Yep. Be glad to, man.
Thank you.
Nate is always giving of his time. Thank you, buddy.
Yeah. Glad to do it and talk to anybody to help. I'm here. I know what it's like. There is life after, I promise. And it's good.
That's right. Okay. Any other things. Any other questions? Someone asked, what is typical time from sentencing to surrender if there is one? Yeah, 45 to 90 days is right. It varies a little bit. Some people need more time. The judge may extend it. You want to try to wait till your designation comes in so you don't go to the marshal's office.
Yeah.
Okay.
Justin, I have a quick question just for kind
Oh,
of general
yes,
question.
Casey. Yeah, question.
So do you or anyone else have advice on, so I still own and have an interest in businesses and have business partners, and to the extent that, communication with them, is there anything that you would recommend doing or not doing, and what you can and cannot discuss while you're there?
So my plan was next week, we're going to cover tips 6 through 10 of the surrendering. Today was 1 through 5. As part of 6 to 10, I was going to cover. So you're not going in next week, right? You have a little time.
November 2nd. So yes, next week.
Casey,
But
why don't
I can
give me a
email you
call?
separately.
Oh, so you're
Okay.
going to be in by the time we do it. Yeah. So then
Give me a
let's
call,
do that.
Casey.
I'm going to cover it next week, but we'll do it separately before, because it's more than just a 1 or 2 minute answer about Sam. I think I'd like to be on that call when you do it.
Yeah.
Maybe we can do it on Monday, and I'll offer some insights that you should consider. And I'll actually can share a couple of really good examples with you of clients that are people in our community that have done it well. So maybe
I
we'll do
dealt with
it
that
on
too, if
Monday.
you want.
Me and Sam will do a call on Monday. Okay.
Perfect.
Good.
Yeah, Nate, also, if you.
Yeah, I
if you wanna-
dealt with that too. So I could give some insight on it.
Casey, where are you surrendering?
The FMC Fort Worth.
That's right. Okay, got it. Thank you. Okay. Hey, we may have to do another YouTube video. It's been a while. We can cover some of these
Yeah,
things.
let's go, man. I'd love to. It'd be great. It
okay.
only helps my business. The more I put out with you, the better my business gets.
Well, because you talk about it. And that's what I encourage everyone to do. Talk about it. Don't run from it, because Google is a
Yes.
tricky thing, and you can control the narrative or you can let the DOJ control it. Okay. Anyone else? Any other questions before we wrap this up?
One more question
Yes.
from Nebraska.
Yes.
And it may be difficult to speak quickly so everybody can get going with their day, but the statement of reason for BOP designation, I was going to write out my own, I guess, statement of reason of why I want to go to a particular Englewood is where I want to go for programming and different things. And so I can get that written up prior to going to my PSR.
So you haven't done your PSR yet. So from what I've just heard, you want to articulate why a specific prison is in your best interest.
Correct.
I don't think there's any downside, I suppose, Scott or Sam, perhaps articulating to a probation officer why, that may make the most sense. Your lawyer is going to ask for it. And if the judge recommends it, you have a pretty good chance of getting it, especially if it's within 500 miles of your release address. But I don't think there's any, I don't see any downside, I suppose, unless.
Remember, Englewood, I don't know if you qualify for RDAP, but Englewood camp does not have RDAP. So I don't know if you qualify or not.
I have everything you can think of documentation wise, my treatment facility for alcohol substance, my physician, my sponsor, blah, 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 blah. But I'm going to low security.
Oh, you're going to the low. Okay.
Yeah. So those are, again, I don't see any downside in doing something like that. You always want to you want to advocate for yourself. That's what we try to teach people to do. Any other thing so next week we're going to do tips 6 through 10. And I want to get more into prison life and filling out and figuring out that day. So very grateful for everyone attending, and have a wonderful rest of your weekend. And I look forward to seeing all of you again next Friday for our live interactive webinar.
Thanks, Justin.
All right, guys. Have a great weekend.
Everybody.
Nate, great to see
Guys,
you, bud.
great to see
Bye-bye.
you too, Ben.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, Scott, Sam, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
You're so welcome.